The discomfort I was avoiding was the door to what I prayed for. And when I finally stopped treating my life like a law book and I started running it with love, everything shifted. My business, my relationships, my peace. And that's what we're unpacking today. Hey guys, it's George from the sunny beaches of Cancun for a wedding. And if you've ever read a quote, heard a sermon, or cracked open a fortune cookie and thought, man, I've heard this before and I still didn't listen and I wished I did, this episode is for you. We all just closed out 2025 and I decided to do it in extraordinary fashion. I had deep, honest conversations with my mentors, with my clients, and my business partners, the people that I call when things are amazing and when it feels like everything is on fire. And I asked each of them one question. If you had to summarize your 2025 in 3 takeaways that you're actually bringing forward in 2026, what would they be? I took all of those answers, geeked out on my Remarkable because I'm addicted to digital note taking now, and I distilled them into a handful of buckets that keep coming up over and over again in entrepreneurship and life. And so welcome back to the Mind of George Show. This is where entrepreneurs discover that true scaling isn't about hacks or tactics. It's about aligning your mindset, your message, and your marketing to create sustainable growth that feels authentic and aligned to who you are. If this is your first time here, welcome to the family. If you've been rocking with me for a while, you know the deal. This isn't just about theory. It's about the real stuff that we're all facing and feeling behind the scenes that I want to help you with, I want to guide you with, and I want to be in it with you. And today we're talking about why staying connected when it's quiet matters more than anything else when it comes to momentum. Why your business grows faster when you stop performing and start participating, and why you can't be the external solution to someone else's internal problems. Whether that's a client, a team member, a friend, your kids, it doesn't matter. So we break down from all of these summaries from everybody, macro patience and why the long game isn't sexy, but it's sustainable. We talk about the fact that a hobby can actually just be a hobby. You don't have to monetize your joy for it to actually be worth it. We talk about relationships, the reason, the season, the lifetime, and why the reason that none of those labels are actually permanent. And I think the most important thing is I'm going to invite you to look at the resistance, right? We've heard this famous quote so many times. Mike Tyson said, the magic you're looking for is in the work you won't do. But I want you to look at that resistance, whether it's the uncomfortable conversation, the quiet time that we're avoiding, the boundary that we won't enforce, or the new behavior that we're being inconsistent with. And I want you to see it as a doorway or an opportunity to the life or the business that you've been praying for, instead of using it as proof that you're behind. And my hope is that by the end of this episode, you're going to walk away with a handful of questions and lessons that you can utilize to audit your current state right now, your last year, and actually create a different one for 2026 to be your year, the best year ever, instead of running the same loop, the same race with the same results, just with a new calendar and a new date on it. So my invitation in this episode is to grab your notebook or just let this wash over you, like listen to it, feel it, pray through it while you're driving, walking the dog, sitting in your house. But either way, I invite you to come into this to reflect, to rest, and to reset and choose who you're going to be this year, but not on accident, not by default, but with intentionality and purpose. And I want you to tell me which one of these landed for you. Shoot me a message on Instagram, shoot me an email. I want you to tell me which one landed for you. And if I missed any or you have any reflections, share them with me. I would love to hear them. I would love to read them. I would love to pray on them. And so without further ado, let's get into the episode. Have you ever had one of those moments where you heard a quote, you read a fortune cookie, you heard somebody drop a knowledge bomb, and then you just paused in that moment and you were like, I've heard this before and I wish I listened to it? Well, that's what today's episode is about. Happy New Year. Happy 2026. And in today's episode, I am going to be number one looking at my notes. So if you're looking ahead of me, I'm addicted to my Remarkable. I fell in love with this digital notebook and now I'm not losing pages and sticky notes everywhere. And I have fully transitioned and I love it. And over the last month, I've been in so many conversations with my mentors, with my clients, with business partners. And I asked every single one of them if they had to summarize their 2025 in
3 takeaways or 3 lessons or things that they're going to carry forward into the new year, what would they be? And I had each one of them share all of these with me, and I wrote them all down. I combined them all together and I put them in buckets for all of us, because success comes from simplicity and not complication or complexity. And it's really a long game of discipline and doing the things that we know get to be done without complicating the massive process. And so this episode isn't necessarily a how-to, even though it's going to be. I'm going to share bits and pieces. It's more of a reflection. It's my perspective, my riff, and my 2 cents on the real stuff that came out of all of these deep conversations with people that resonate for them and might resonate with you. You might see your business, you might see your life, you might see your habits, you might see your patterns, and you might find them all underneath things that you're currently facing that will give you clarity to be able to face them differently. But the most important thing about this is all of us have a goal to have more impact, to have a bigger business, to have more clients, right? Which we would call scaling. And this is the reminder that scaling doesn't require more pressure. It requires more presence and processing. Okay. And these conversations are huge. So this is some of the people that I respect the most, I admire, I look up to, the ones I call when I need advice, the ones I call when I have a challenge. And it's really, really powerful once you break these all down. And so I have them broken down into a couple of sections. Okay. So section number 1 I call stay connected, even when it's quiet. Okay. And so what were some of the takeaways that I heard? Number 1, don't let your foot off the gas when it comes to lead generation and connection, especially when things are working. Number 2, there are existing online communities and events and places that you belong that you should show up in and not self-isolate. And then number 3, which I loved this one, is handwritten mail will trump every other medium when it comes to staying top of mind. And that one was huge for me as I went through this and started to write these down and read these notes, right? The staying connected even when it's quiet. The growth that we desire, the things that we're going after, the things that we want in 3 months and 6 months and 9 months and 12 months completely depend on our consistency with how we show up right now. The places that we give our energy and our intention every single day consistently over the next 90 days is what dictates the results that we have. And there's this false belief that momentum comes from these massive actions or giant swings, when in actuality, it's built by showing up when no one else is watching, but also ensuring that we keep ourselves in communities and in circles that support us and call us up and to some degree hold us accountable to create the things that we want. And the biggest thing underneath this all is, I think all too often we take for granted the power of our circle and the power that that presence of our circle carries, because we'll accidentally underestimate the power of being in the room or being in someone's life, both as a recipient, but also as someone that people think about, right? We take for granted that we have access to somebody, that we have a relationship with somebody, and we don't lean in and engage. We miss growth opportunity, but we also take advantage of the fact that we have a customer or we have a client and we're not proactive about staying in contact with them, or like Steve said, staying in their mailbox. And the most important takeaway in this section is that visibility compounds, right? The more we show up. I think about like my men's groups and the groups that I'm a part of. And magically is like the more consistently I show up in those things, the more consistently I get seen and I get called up to where I want to go. But the goal here, as the first quote is that we're supposed to keep showing up in the day-to-day, even when it's not urgent. Even when it's not urgent. Okay? So the second section of takeaways I have is performance versus participation. And there were 2 big takeaways in this one. Number 1 was just go after or go build the thing that you want to build. Like, just do it and give it your all and don't hold back, because the answers you're looking for, the clarity that you're looking for, come on the other side of that action and then iterating as you learn and you go. And the second one, which kind of blew my mind and I'm going to riff on for a minute, is asking yourself this question in your business and in your life. Are you doing things from participation or from performance? And I wrote an entire section in my notes about this one, because performance requires a lot of energy from us, right? And that energy is typically tied to our ego. It's like, what can I create? How is this going to make me feel? Am I going to get my identity from this? What are they going to think about me? What are they going to feel about me? But participation, active participation, is driven by us co-creating. For me, it's co-creating with God, but also co-creating with my customers, co-creating with my team, co-creating with the people that I am in this game with. Because participation is driven at the deepest level by alignment and our intention. And alignment happened to be my word of the year, according to Spotify, between me and my guests. But when we think about performance, performance is like, what will they think? And participation is like, what's true for me in this moment? And I think a mistake that people make is they think participation is passive, but it's not passive in any means. It's actually an active agreement that we make to show up and engage with whatever situation is unfolding in front of us, that we co-create with the impact that we want to make. We co-create with our team. We co-create with our clients. We co-create with our mentors. We co-create with our family. We co-create with our kids. And we meet every single one of those situations as a participant and making sure that what we're doing is in alignment and for the greater good. And the big thing about this, as I really like look at my notes again, is that every secret to scaling is actually about participation, right? Leadership is not doing something alone. It's doing it with others and bringing them with you. Even when you think about your clients, when you think about your customers, whether they're physical products or service based, is you're co-creating something. It's a two-way street. But all too often, the default that we see in the world all the time is like, make it about me or what I've done or what I've achieved. But that doesn't actually make it about the customer. It doesn't make it about the other participant. And that participation to some degree has an act of surrender, but it also feels 1,000 times easier because you're taking the weight of the world off of your back. It's okay to make adjustments. It's okay to realign. It's okay to have other people influence what you're doing, or else you end up alone down the road. And so when we think about these ideas in this bucket of, performing versus participating, participating is still us building, it's us creating, it's us going after what we want and not waiting till we're ready, but also not putting all of that weight and burden on ourselves that we have to do it alone. No one else can see it, that I have to have all the answers. I have to have it perfect. It's us being in the process and making sure that our intention is clear and that we're aligned with what we're doing. And if we're not, to make adjustments. Because the way that we learn is we learn with people. We'll iterate while we're in motion, but we have to start and we have to keep growing. And I love this because a dear friend of mine said this as he gave a sermon on it, which is, he's like, are you performing or are you participating in the co-creation of something? And this lands deeply for me as a devout lover of Jesus, is that, like, am I allowing God to be the visionary and me to be the integrator? And what that requires is presence. That requires me slowing down. That requires, for me, when I get those gut moments or that gut check of like, this doesn't feel right, to actually pause and stop and realign. And also on the other side, where I've like this audible voice in my head of like, do this thing, that I follow that and I steward that and I see that through to the finish line. The third bucket of takeaways that I heard, and this one is powerful, it's not about you. And I think that's really, really important. It's massively freeing, So what I heard is 3 specific ones. Number 1 is it's not about me, and that's a relief. Number 2, and I want you to hear this one and I want you to write this one down. I cannot be the external solution for someone else's internal problem. I cannot be the external solution for somebody else's external or internal problem. That one made me stop in my tracks. And I was like, can you repeat that? Can you explain that? And that one was powerful. And then the third one, and this was from somebody that I respect massively, is that leadership doesn't mean that I have to do it alone. And so some of the thoughts that I have on this and the notes that I wrote is that when we let go of being the answer or being the solution, we make space to be available. And if we take this in the business context, by being available means we get to be present, we get to co-create, we get to be in with somebody and help them navigate, grow, change, perform, whatever that thing is. But we also relieve that massive pressure of thinking we have to have every answer, that everything we do has to work, which is not accurate, it's not real, and it's not possible. And so when we understand that other people's outcomes aren't our weight to carry, it actually creates relief for us to be in with them and help them carry their own and be able to give feedback or coaching or provide products or solutions that empowers them, even so to our team. Because one of these came from a person who has a big team, and their biggest challenge is they were burnt out and they couldn't feel like they could ever rest. Well, that's because every time their team came to them, they were giving them an answer instead of asking them questions, which would empower that team to be able to stumble a little bit and to learn a little bit, but to then step up to the plate to reduce that burden. So when we think about this in the lens of like leadership, true leadership isn't about being over responsible for everything or taking responsibility for things that aren't yours to carry. It's more of a emotional responsibility, but with boundaries and not self-sacrificing, not overextending ourselves, but instead having those boundaries that invite others up. Because I think, and I fell into this trap for a lot of my life, is I'm like, when I can be the solution for everything, when I can burden everything, when I can shoulder everything, that's what makes me humble. But really what it is at a deep level, it's control. It's me trying to control an outcome, control a situation, control a narrative. And that doesn't win for anyone anywhere. And so I think if I was summarizing these takeaways in sections, it would be that leadership is an invitation to be present and to be available, but not to be the answer to everything. Leadership is an invitation to be present and be available, but not to be an answer to everything. So that's the third section. Then the fourth section I have is the long game isn't sexy, but it's sustainable. The long game isn't sexy, but it's sustainable. And I know I'm like a child right now, but I love looking at this remarkable because it like brings me so much joy as I look down and I read this, having everything organized. And there were a couple takeaways that came up in this one. And these are quotes from them. I now understand macro patience. We are in this for the long game. And when I look at a lot of the challenges that I see that I coach people on, and a lot of the ones that I've faced, it's because I'm lacking both micro and macro patience. It's because I have unrealistic expectations. My nervous system's dysregulated, and I'm being reactive to every single thing in front of me, which is preventing me from being consistent and continually making deposits and momentum and progress towards that macro goal. By macro, I mean big. So macro patience, meaning we're playing this game for the long term. And then the second takeaway in this bucket is that, where is it? Being the go-to person is an honor or a privilege, but it's not a burden. And the reason I share this is because I hear this sometimes, and I've said this thing same time where it's like, God, I wish somebody would help me. Like, why does everybody come to me with their problems? Like, why do I keep getting all these 911s? Why am I involved in so many people's fires? And there was a time where I would be like resentful for that. And so have others. And we talked about this at deep when I was asking these questions. But truthfully, it's like an answered prayer. It's like we want to lead, we want to help. It's a testament that somebody feels safe enough to meet you in their breakdown. It's a testament that they feel safe enough to reach out, that they trust you enough, they respect you enough. And it's an honor and it's a responsibility, but it's not a burden. And so some of the takeaways as I was reflecting on these ones that landed for me, and maybe they land for you, is that if you want to lead something that matters, right? If you want to be a leader, you want to be known for something, you want to be impactful in the world, you want to execute your vision, your timeline needs to outlast your feelings. And so I think about this as a parent. I love my son dearly, but there have been so many times where I've shown up as a father, not because I felt like it in the moment, but because I was committed to the vision and I had that macro patience and I showed up in that moment, regardless of my feelings, to be consistent. And when I really, really unpack this one's going to apply to business. This one's going to apply to leadership. But the people that we're helping, that we're guiding, that we're leading, the ones that buy our products, that buy our services, that consume our content, that listen to our podcast, that tell other people about us, they aren't buying our product or service. They're actually buying into our consistency. They're buying in to our embodiment of those things that we teach. And it's important to understand that because at the beginning of the year, and I might have shared this on the podcast, I was given a prompt by a coach of mine who said, I want you to pray and then write down the answer. And the prayer is simple. What are all of the things that you ask or expect of others that you don't do for yourself? I was like, I'm not going to have an answer to this. Turns out I had pages of answers and it rocked me to the core, but it was also a massive invitation. And when I wrote all those answers down and then I started practicing what I preached more consistently and more in integrity, everything around me shifted. My clients, their results, my friendships, all of it. Because being the embodiment, being the example and being consistent with it, even when we don't feel like it, but because we're committed to that bigger picture and we have that macro patience, means that we become the go-to for people, but not the go-to because we say so, the go-to because there's evidence. And that evidence is what allows people to trust us. And that trust can't be broken. It's the moat around our business. It's the moat around our life. And when there's real trust established, people stick around. They stay. They stay in a month. They stay in a year. They stay in 2 years. And I think the big takeaway for this, for all of us, is that us being sustainable is way more important than being scalable, but that's actually what scales. And underneath all of business, underneath all of life is relationships. And sustainability in those relationships is what gets them to stick around and to be impactful. And so that's the section on how the long game isn't sexy, it's sustainable. And then I got 3 more sections. Okay. So the next section is let joy be enough. And this one had the most takeaways. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 takeaways in this bucket. And there was a similar theme in all of them. And I have some thoughts and notes on this one. So what were the takeaways? Number 1 is a hobby can simply be a hobby and it doesn't require an expectation. My 4 words of the year are joy, authenticity, safety, and curiosity. Dancing brought fun back into my life and unlocked my passion. I paused long enough to remember who I am versus what others expect of me. And curiosity is my hidden weapon because it lets me ask, I wonder if, without needing to control the outcome. And the big undertone of this one is that so many people in business accidentally sacrifice themselves to build a business. They stop playing. They stop having fun. They stop investing in themselves outside of the business. Or when they invest in themselves outside of the business, they turn that into a business. They turn the hobby into a business of performance. They turn the play into something that they can measure. They get completely attached to the result. And so it takes the fun out of filling their bucket. And then it's treated just like the business. And then they end up burning out because you don't need a spreadsheet or to track everything that you love. Because having joy and having fun and playing, even if there's no quote unquote measurable return on investment, is still productive. It's productive for you. The goal of your business is to serve as a vehicle to support your life, not a vehicle to sacrifice your life to drive it. And the one that I wrote a giant line on my notebook over here was around the curiosity. Because curiosity is actually how we discover what works. But what tends to happen is we have all these biases that follow us in. And so we'll have an idea, we'll have a thought, but then we'll predict what the outcome is going to be. And then we won't follow it through or we won't execute it because we're not curious. So we end up trying to predict and we make decisions based on the prediction instead of being curious and learn whether it worked or it didn't work through actually participating. And so this is your invitation. If you fit into this bucket, if you've been grinding or performing or you're restless or you don't take time off, you're too busy optimizing, every minute of the day matters, and it's all around business, then you need to go do something. You need a hobby without an expectation of an outcome. You need to go play without an ROI. So like go dance, go take up a pottery class, go paint, go pick up sourdough, making as a hobby and a habit, make some bread. Do something that brings you joy. And this is even me. The other day I went snowboarding and I was like, I'm going to go snowboarding. I'm going to spend like 6 hours out there. I did it. I spent 45 minutes out there and I was like, I'm done. And then I just sat at the lodge at the top of the mountain. I stared at the clouds. I stared at the snow and it brought me so much joy. But I was honestly conflicted because I was like, wait, I said I was going to get like 12 runs in today. And I caught myself in something that I love, which is my quiet time with God, which is snowboarding in nature, in silence, alone. And I was measuring it and I caught it. And so I just sat there and I soaked it all in. But our nervous system and our joy and our fun and our play bucket deserves just as much growth, if not more, than our business or our marketing or our audience or our tasks. You're the most important player in your business. And so you get to fill your bucket. So go fill your bucket. Next section. Relationships are daily. They're not destinations. And this one was one of mine. And I've said this quote for years. Relationships happen for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and the choice isn't up to me. And the thing that I added is that relationships are a day-to-day decision because they require intention and input. And the reason I say this is this year has been the year of rekindled relationships. Relationships that I truthfully counted out. I was like, well, that one ended. That's where we're going to be. That one was one of the ones that happened for a reason. And in the last 3 months, I have been rekindled in 15, 20 relationships. Some former business partners I hadn't talked to in 5 years, a family member I hadn't talked to in 8 years, a family member I hadn't seen in a decade. But there was a part of me that was convinced I was protecting myself because I just assumed they were out. I didn't reach out. I didn't participate. I was just like, that's where it is. And God blessed me so much and magically brought all these people back into my life. And I realized that I was holding myself small and holding myself back because I kept it at face value and I didn't dig deeper. And this isn't me saying that you have to cling to everybody, but it is me inviting you to choose who you are when showing up in each interaction. And maybe being curious and not so finite, or understanding that it's finished just because of how it ended. Some of my closest friends right now, one of them comes to mind, and he'll tell you this all day if you ever meet him in person. We shouldn't be friends because he said to me verbatim, when I met you, you were an arrogant prick. And I am so grateful that I bumped into you in a grocery store 3 years later. And I was wounded. I was hurt. I was compensating. And he is one of my nearest, dearest friends now. But it's also because he gave me a second chance and I grew, and then I got to learn in the process. And when I think about our success in life, our success in business, every ounce of our success really boils down to relationships. That's why I talk about it so much on this podcast and my coaching and all of it, is that I really believe our relative scale of success is predicated on our ability to be in relationship, to manage relationships, to pour into relationships, to navigate those relationships. And so my quote of relationships happen for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, I think the mistake that I made is I made each one of those buckets permanent. And I was like, well, it happened for a reason. That's the permanent reason. Or it happened for a season. That's the permanent season. Or it happened for a lifetime and they're with me forever. But none of them are forever and none of them are permanent. I think the goal is to measure relationships by their purpose. Some people, some relationships, some interactions, they're just mirrors. They're a reflection for us to see how we show up, how we operate, how much of ourself we stayed aligned to. Some of them are messengers. They show up and they're like a angel sent by God, where we hear something, we learn something. And then some of them, and very few of them, are like mountains where they show up and they never leave and you see them everywhere. But they each serve a purpose. And I think it's our job to look at all of them and ask who we are in that relationship. How do we show up? And to not get tied into the permanence of all of them, because we're all humans and we all go through stuff. We all have up days, we have down days. And I think all too often, and maybe I'm only speaking for myself, sometimes we rob ourselves of our biggest growth mechanism or our biggest mirror, or our biggest messenger, because we judge them for a down day, because we made it about logic instead of the emotion underneath it, because we didn't give them another chance, because we didn't check ourselves at the door and ask how we showed up and how we contributed to that. And I have an undying belief in doing entrepreneurship for 16, 17 years and leadership coaching for 25 years. If I look at every single thing in my life that has either worked or hasn't worked, at some degree, every single one of them is influenced by a relationship. A good one, things I did right, things we mutually poured into each other, or ones that weren't ideal, where we didn't hear each other, where we fought, where we were having two different conversations. And the quality of my results on both sides has been 100% dictated by the quality of the relationship underneath it. Because I think the only way to not be in a relationship is to go move to the mountains in silence alone. Even if you're a monk in monastery in silence, you're still around peers and community, and there's relationships. If you're in business, you're in the business of relationships. If you're in family or friendship, you're in the family and friendship of relationships. Everything that we have is directly correlated to the quality of our relationships. And then the last bucket of takeaways that I have happen to be one of mine, and then a few other ones that were sprinkled throughout. And one of the things that I shared as my lesson is that there's never a finish line. So now I'm getting excited about the discomfort because it's shaping my future self. And I think about this with tasks. I think about this with goals. I think about this with results. I think about this with business. And this goes all the way back to an early takeaway of like, never take your foot off the gas. I was so convinced for so many years that I just wanted to get there. And when I was there, it would be different. When I was there, I'd achieve it. But then I realized that that's death the moment I stopped growing. And I would look at resistance, I would look at challenges, I would look at roadblocks or speed bumps as something bad. But yet, ironically, like when I go to the gym and it's hard, I look at it as good. And I've heard this quote more times than I can count. I know Mike Tyson said it and went famous. He said something along the lines is the magic you're looking for is in the work that you won't do. For me, how I would describe that for me and why it was my takeaway is the discomfort that I was avoiding was the door to what I prayed for. The discomfort that I was avoiding is the door to what I prayed for. And I realized I don't ever want to be in a place in my life or in my business or with my son or in my relationship where I'm convinced I don't ever want to be quote unquote uncomfy. Because the most meaningful moments in my life have come from facing that with love, facing that with joy, facing that as a participant in it, and being curious and excited to go through that process. And so I'll label that discomfort as just resistance, is the easiest way to label it. And when we get excited about resistance, when we get excited about facing it, I would submit that that's the moment where we're finally building something worth building and worth becoming. And you've all heard this. I've heard this a million times. People don't value things that came easy, but we always value or remember or grow through the things that had a challenge. Doesn't mean sometimes we want to face it. Doesn't mean sometimes we want to, have rainbows and unicorns shooting out of our butt with joy. But it means we choose to because we have that macro patience. And we understand that by facing it, by growing through it, by getting the mirror reflection back to us or by getting the message inside of it, it helps us become a better version of ourselves, helps change our perspective. It helps us have empathy. It helps us have compassion. It helps us relate to the situation or to the people in the situation different, which all of it at the very, very core of it is us building a deeply integrous relationship with ourselves. And I think that that's the point. And I've been obsessed this year. There's a book that I've been playing with called, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. This woman who worked in palliative care and would interview everybody near the end of their life. And I've mentioned it on this podcast. I've mentioned a lot of calls. But if you look at underneath all of those top 5 regrets, and you can just Google them, I'm not going to pull them up now. You just Google them. Basically, what they all boil down to was like quitting, surrendering, never being their authentic self, never giving their all, cutting off relationships, not spending enough time doing things fun or with people that they love. And really what it is having that love for ourselves and investing in ourselves and pursuing our growth and pursuing our, maybe pursuing is not the right word, pursuing our growth, but being willing to look in the mirror, being able to open the door of resistance or ask for feedback or be excited about the fact that somebody says we can do something better and we get excited about that instead of being like, oh, I'm so bad. I'm so wrong. I don't know what to do. Because if I tied a lot of this together as I wrap this show today, I would summarize it in a few ways. The first way is that we lose when we allow the results we create in our business or our life to become our identity, because that's the performance. Instead of them becoming our invitation to how we show up, right? We're not going to ever be measured by our highlight reels. We're not going to ever be measured by our bank accounts. We're going to be measured by, truthfully, the mark that we leave on people, the mark that we leave every day. Are we improving upon the silence? Or are we making it worse? Right? Are we improving upon the silence, or was it better before we got involved? That would be number one. Number two is, are we realistic about the fact that we don't really want a finish line? Right? You see story left, right, and center. People sell their companies, they retire, and they're like, what am I doing? There's no meaning to this. Like, meaning comes through creation and being a participant in creating something, not achieving a mile marker, a finish line, performance. It's the act of creation, as we're given this gift of life and this gift of breath every single day. And so the goal is like, what do we want to do with it? That might be making bread. I hope some of you pick up a sourdough hobby. And if you do, I will give you my mailing address because I love home baked sourdough. And Jeff, if you're listening to this, I miss your home baked sourdough because I have friends that have done this and they mail me jalapeno cheese sourdough. Maybe it's picking up pottery. Maybe it's going to play. Maybe it's going to have fun. But allow yourself to constantly be creating. And then the third one, and I heard this from one of the people who shared these quotes with me. He said, the mistake a lot of people make is they run their life like it's law instead of love. And so we're so hard on ourselves and we try to put this ROI around everything. Well, did I hit my task? Did I hit my workout? Did I hit my macros? Did I do X? Did I do Y? And we create this rigidity that prevents us from actually living and being present, instead of creating this love for ourselves of like, I'm choosing this because I love it. I'm choosing this because it's going to bring me joy. I'm choosing this because it's attached to my big vision. I'm choosing this because this feels like the right thing to do. And it's this really interesting dance between that performance and participation thing. Yes. Can we all check boxes 100%? Can we all hit the wickets every single day? Yes. But if we're doing that at a cost and we're like, oh, well, I did this because me checking these items proves that I'm a good person, or proves that I'm successful, or proves that I'm a good partner, or proves that I'm a good parent, we're missing the whole mark. Like, my son doesn't care that I check a box of items to do every day. He cares that when I'm doing one of those items, I'm in it with him. And it's no different than our business. It's no different than our clients. It's no different than our coaching. And so I wanted to share all these because so many of these resonated deeply for me, and they're invitations for me. And I think for you, they're invitations for you to find what those takeaways were for you for the year. And then which ones of them are you going to carry forward, that you're going to realize the discipline to believe them and to love yourself in the process of following them is, when we look back next year, what we're going to be grateful for. And to not let them become a fortune cookie that we opened, that we shoved in a drawer, and that we find 5 years later, but to become an embodiment of it, to become something that we practice. And I'm like looking at my notes again because there were so many, and there's so many deep lessons for me. And so if any of this episode landed and you're thinking about a friend right now, you're like, God, you know what? They could use this episode. Send it to them, please. Pass it around. I'm horrible at self-promotion, but my mission with this podcast is to make it valuable, to help you, to shift your perspective, to give you insight, to let you know you're not alone, and to spread that love. And so it would mean the world to me if you shared it with somebody. But if I can help you in any way, you know how to get a hold of me. And what I would love at minimum, if you're like, this landed, great. Tell me what landed. But what I would love even more is, I want to keep collecting all of these. Is if you have any takeaways from 2025, any of those lessons, any of those principles, anything that you're taking into the new year that you want to be driven by, that you want to be guided by or contained by, that you want to measure yourself against in a year, I want you to send them to me. Just send me a DM on Instagram. It's George Bryant, ITS, and then George Bryant, or connect with me on my website. Use the form, email us. The email's up there. But share a takeaway. Maybe you have a quote that landed. Maybe you have something you're focusing on. Maybe you have 5 lessons that you're reflecting on. I would personally love to read them because I resonate so deeply with so many of the ones that were shared with me. And I think that that's the power of our community. And so I wanted to share this just from the bottom of my heart. So I love you to pieces. I appreciate you immensely. This is where we're going to land today's plane. So I will either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we are